السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. One of my favorite stories of the seerah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam deals with one of the most bleakest times of his life, and the time when his wife Khadija had passed away, the year in which his uncle Abu Talib had died, the very same year in which the incident of Ta'if occurred. All of these occurred in the same year, and that is the 10th year of the Prophet's da'wah. And in that year, really, it was the downside of the entire life of the Prophet. He never felt as alone, if you like, and as persecuted. His wife, his uncle, his society had rejected him. Ta'if had attempted to stone him to death. And he knew he needed to find a new place to go to. He didn't know where that place would be. And so for the rest of those next 2.5, 3 years, he started traveling from tribe to tribe during the time of Hajj. He would go to each of the major tribes and literally ask them to adopt him. Ask them, can I go and immigrate to your land? And he concentrated on the larger tribes, the Kinda, the Bani Abdullah ibn Kad, the Banu Hanifa, the Banu Amir ibn Sa'sa'a, the larger tribes, the famous tribes. But he never neglected or ignored the smaller tribes. And he gave the same passion, the same zeal, the same enthusiasm to whomever he met. And it was during one of those seasons that he passed by a small group of 6 people. These weren't the large tribes of the Kinda and the Hawazin and the Banu Kilab. No, these were 6 people, that's it. And he said, who are you? Man al-Qawm? They said, we are the Khazraj. And the Khazraj, it didn't quite ring in his mind. Who are the Khazraj? He said, the Khazraj of Yathrib, the Khazraj of the Banu Nadir, the Khazraj of the Yahud, that Khazraj? They said, yes, that Khazraj. So he said, can I sit and speak with you? And they said, go ahead. And he sat down and he spoke to them with the same passion, the same zeal, the same enthusiasm he gave to the larger tribes. And then he moved on. Little did he know that it was in that small tribe that the real seed of Islam, the seed of the new Islamic Republic, would be planted. Little did he realize that the actual opening, the hijrah, would come from the land of Yathrib. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed him a dream that he would be emigrating to a land. And it never occurred to him that that land was Yathrib. Because Yathrib was not a large city. Yathrib was not a center of civilization. When he saw the dream, he said, perhaps it is Yemen, perhaps it is Sana'a, Hadramaut. These are large civilizations. I want to go over there. And he said, I was surprised to find out it was Yathrib. And what we really learn from this story, and I think that story is extremely relevant to the founding of the MSA. What we really learn from this story is that the Prophet ﷺ never trivialized the opportunity to do any good. He never ever thought, who are these people? What's the point of speaking to 6 people from Khazraj? He never closed any door that Allah presented in front of him. Any opportunity he had, he gave that opportunity his best, not knowing which opportunity, which door that he's knocking, which path that he's traversing would actually lead him to the final destination. In the end, the opening did not come from the major tribes and civilizations. In the end, it was not Allah's help that came through the larger tribes. It was Allah's help that came through the unexpected tribe, the tribe that the Prophet never thought would be the primary tribe that would help him, and that was the Khazraj. As we all know, the Khazraj, the next year they came with 12 people and they embraced Islam, and the first treaty of Aqaba took place. The third year they came with 72 people, 6 of whom were women, and the second treaty of Aqaba took place. And then they sent a letter to the Prophet ﷺ, and they said, Ya Rasulullah, for how long will you remain persecuted in Mecca? Come over to Yathrib, come over to Medina, we will adopt you, we will protect you. And so they came again, and they had yet another treaty, and this was a political treaty. This was a treaty to come to Medina. It was called Yathrib at the time, and then it was called Medina. This is the way of da'wah. This is the way of our religion, brothers and sisters. We do our best in every opportunity. We plant our seeds wherever we go. We throw Allah's khair, we throw Allah's blessing that Allah has given us. And Allah knows where those seeds are going to sprout forth. Allah knows where those plants will germinate. If we do our job, the results will come from places that we didn't expect. And this is the way that I view the founders of the MSA. When they came here back in the 50s and 60s, many of them did not even think they would stay here for long. They thought we're only coming for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and then go back home. I don't think any of them had the vision that 50 years from now, the Islam would be flourishing the way it is. Their small society, the Muslim Student Association, would become as large as it is. But you know what? They gave it their full. They gave it their all. They gave it their ikhlas, their humbleness, their sincerity. And it was that ikhlas and sincerity that planted the seeds that we are now reaping today. And I want to conclude by getting a little bit personal here. 1963 is a date that all of us know, especially sitting in this room, for two reasons. Number one, it was the founding of the MSA. And number two, it was of course the famous speech by Martin Luther King. And we're celebrating the 50th year of both of those incidents. Well, I am also celebrating, if you like, in my own way, a personal milestone in my own family's history. My father, whom some of you in the audience know, Dr. Yasir Qadhi, Dr. Qadhi, came to Houston, Texas in 1963. And he is one of the founders of the Islamic Society of Greater Houston, and he is the founder of the MSA in Texas and in Houston, Texas, and in the University of Houston. And as I was driving to the airport to come to ISNA, wallahi, it's embarrassing, youngsters here, second generation, it's embarrassing. We don't even ask our mothers and fathers the stories and the struggles that they went through. As I was driving to the airport, all of a sudden it clicked. 1963, Martin Luther King, my father, the civil rights. What was his experiences coming to Houston, Texas in the early 60s? I had never asked him that. So wallahi, as I'm driving to the airport to come to ISNA, I called him up and I said, Abu, can you tell me when you came in 1963? It just struck me now. It must have been a segregated South. And he said, of course. I mean, the blase, of course. Didn't you realize it was segregated? Of course. I said, you mean you actually saw the signs, whites only, blacks only? He said, what do you mean I saw the signs? I went to the black only areas. What do you mean I saw the signs? I'm going to those black only areas. And it never occurred to me, wallahi, look how, and I speak here, I mean, how ignorant we immigrants are. The civil rights is not irrelevant to our history. The civil rights has everything to do with us sitting in this room today, with our own struggles. My father had to go to the black-only restroom, the black-only place in the restaurant. My father, he told me the first time I came here, I never knew of racism. And I walked into the barber shop to get my hair cut. The barber threw me out and he said, no blacks allowed, even though my father's brown. But hey, no blacks allowed. Get out of here. My father never understood this when he came, but he had to learn very fast and very quick. This was a very different culture. I said, did you watch Martin Luther King? Did you know what was happening? He said, I didn't have a TV, but I knew what was going on, and I saw it a few days later, the speech that was being given. And of course, he was honest with me. He said, obviously, most of us immigrants that came, he didn't participate in the civil rights movement, but he said we benefited from that movement. And wallahi, this is the reality. Immigrant Muslims, and I'm a child of immigrant Muslims, this is the reality, that we are not just celebrating the 50 years of MSA, we're celebrating the 50 years of the civil rights movements. And I owe a lot to the MSA. My father was telling me so many stories about, he was not involved in New England and up in the north, so perhaps some of you would not know him who were involved up north, but he did tell me in 1966, they had an MSA conference in Houston, Texas. Ismail Raja Faruqi came down to our house, to our apartment back then. I wasn't born back then. We had an apartment. My dad had an apartment. Also, other individuals he mentioned. Dr. Ahmed Sakar, I remember he mentioned, all of these individuals came down, they had an MSA meeting. I said, Abu, how did you know there was an MSA back in 1963-64 when there was no Google, no Wikipedia, no internet, no iPhones? How did you know there was an MSA? He said, we knew there was an organization called the MSA, and in 1964, I founded the first MSA in Texas, and we then connected with other people such as Ismail Raja and others. We connected with them. And I said, you need to write this legacy down. I didn't know that my own father had to suffer through, the segregation laws. This is something I was unfamiliar with. And MSA, as I said, has a personal role even in my own development when I was involved on campus at the University of Houston that my father founded. after the MSA, and I was very active all 4 years of my college life. I was asked to be president the last 2-3 years, and I kept on turning down for personal reasons, but I was very involved with the MSA, and I swear by Allah, if I look back at my 38 plus years on this earth, alhamdulillah, as I look back, if I were to really mention one thing that made me who I am, with the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one thing that made me want to become more knowledgeable, more scholarly. I have a degree in chemical engineering. I was working for Dow Chemical. Why did I change? Why did I shift? If it was one thing, after the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it was my experiences, like those 4 years, my undergraduate at the University of Houston, every year being a full-time dedicated member of the MSA, starting off by setting up the khutbahs, being active on the da'wah tables, giving talks to non-Muslims, eventually giving the khutbah, giving the durus, while I'm still a chemical engineering major. Whatever knowledge I have, just do it. And I realized I have a higher calling. I have a higher calling than just solving nth degree quadratic equations as a chemical engineer. There's something more to life than that. And alhamdulillah, I felt the courage to break over, finish the degree in engineering, and then go and study at the University of Medina. And then alhamdulillah, the rest, as you know, is still history is being made, inshallah, with all of us being here. And one final conclusion, which I have to conclude with, MSA is of course very personal for me, because not only was my father involved, not only did it shape me, but obviously the MSA really stands for the Marriage Services Association of America. And alhamdulillah, my wife and I met in the MSA, and of course my family, my 4 kids, they're clearly also the product of the MSA in this regard. So I owe quite a lot to the MSA. My wife was the president of the sisters section of the MSA when I was an undergraduate there. So alhamdulillah, the MSA has always been, and may it long always be, the Marriage Services Association. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.